It's a track with a history, but does it have a future? We'll find out this week on Motoring 98.
TSN's Motoring 98 is brought to you by Quaker State. The big Q stands for quality, always has, always will, and Midas for new, longer-lasting, performance friction carbon metallic brake pads.
Mosport. You don't have to be a race fan to be familiar with that name. Hello everybody and welcome to Motoring 98. You know, it seems like just yesterday that the driving legends like Sterling Moss, Mark Donohue, Mario Andretti, Gilles Villeneuve and so on were racing here. And although I was much younger then, I was among thousands of fans who jammed Mosport Park not only for the race but to make a weekend of it. I mean, this was the place to be. But again, that was 25 years ago. Well, later on, we'll find out that the new owner would like to bring back those good old days to Mosport. But first, we're going to go back to a story we did a couple of years ago and update it. It was then that we discovered that the steel manufacturers were getting a little nervous about the amount of aluminum being found in today's cars. It was back in 1996 when we went inside Dofasco in Hamilton, one of Canada's largest steel producers. The car manufacturing industry represents 35% of the company's business, or $1 billion annually. The move towards lighter materials like aluminum has made the steel industry nervous, so much so that 35 of the world's leading steel producers got together to discuss the problem. The result? Porsche Engineering was commissioned to develop the ultra-light steel body, with the goal of demonstrating to car manufacturers that steel can be light and still be strong.
We've been dealing with a mindset in the car makers. First mindset or belief was that in order to improve the structural performance of the body and make it more crash resistant, they would have to beef up sections and make it heavier if they were to stick with steel. The second is that in order to save weight, it would cause them to go into a more expensive process, a new technology that was more expensive, or switch to an alternate material like aluminum that also cost them money. The third belief was that because they had been building car bodies for decades using steel, that they pretty well knew how to work with steel and that only incremental weight savings would be possible by working with steel. Now, this ultralight steel auto body is 25% lighter. It has significant improvements in structural performance and safety and crashworthiness, and at the same time it doesn't cost any more. So we've blown those three beliefs of the car makers right out of the water.
Okay. Using 9 mid-size sedans as a benchmark, Porsche developed what is known as a body in white. In other words, a steel shell.
Well, if you were to look at this body in white and compare it to a typical steel body in white, there'd be a number of differences. First of all, you'd notice that it's a very clean and neat design. It's very efficient. There's less steel in it overall, and the steel that's in there is being used very effectively. The body was designed holistically, which means it was treated as one complete unit from the front bumper to the back bumper. We did not try and focus on individual parts and just optimize an individual part. And this was very important to help us save weight because you can't optimize one part without ignoring how it performs in relation to the adjacent part. So we designed the body holistically and therefore put the steel where it was needed and took it away from where it wasn't. It's kind of like the chain analogy. It's only as strong as the weakest link.
Well, this is an example of an automotive part that has been stamped from a tailor-welded blank. And when I refer to a tailor-welded blank, I'm talking about sheet steel that has been welded together in the flat. These are two different types of steel. One is a thicker, higher strength grade of steel compared to a thinner, milder, and more formable grade of steel. One of the advantages that you get by working with tailor-welded blanks is that you can tailor the steel for the most appropriate area on the part. It lets the part designer use the stronger steel where he needs a stronger steel and use a thinner steel where he can get away with a thinner steel. Let's take a closer look at where the thicker steel has been joined to the thinner steel. There's a continuous weld along here where the two materials have been connected in the flat. Then that blank goes to the stamping operation where it is formed into the final part.
Computer simulation was used extensively to predict the behavior of the body in various crash events. We looked at the 5 main crash events: a front crash, a rear crash, a side impact, a roof rollover, and the 50% front offset crash. So as the crash event proceeds, you can study how the material behaves, how the material is deforming, and how the energy of the crash is being absorbed by the steel.
So if car manufacturers adopt the ultralight steel body, they can save money. But don't expect those savings to be passed on to you and I. So where does the consumer benefit?
Well, it does affect the consumer in a few ways. First of all, the lighter body improves fuel economy, so the consumer benefits that way, and therefore there are fewer emissions into the environment. Other things being equal, a lighter body handles better, it steers more responsibly, it accelerates more quickly, it comes to a stop more quickly, so the consumer benefits that way as well. And the other benefit, there is a cost savings here. It's not huge when you compare it to the sticker price of a vehicle, but it's huge in the minds of the car maker when it goes directly to his bottom line.
This is a story of an industry in action.
Gonna take me a press, gonna take me some steel, gonna take my 2 hands and build an automobile.
How many dreams can you shape in a minute, an hour? Ask the people of Dodge.
Turn her out, Henry! Turn her out, Joe! We'll put her together, then watch her go! I took me a press, I took me some steel, I took my 2 hands and built an automobile. I built a Dodge, I built a Dodge.
You know, Lexus have built themselves an enviable reputation for building top-class automobiles. The problem is they've all been way too conservative for their own good. That was until the launch of the 2nd generation GS.
The GS features an upgraded version of the LS400's V8 engine. The 4-litre quad-cam 32-valve V8 is good for 300 horsepower at 6,000 RPM and 310 pounds-feet of torque. The secret to the performance is found in some pretty fancy engineering, namely valve timing that is both intelligent and continuously variable over a 50-degree range. Under light throttle applications and low load conditions, the timing is advanced. Now tromp the gas pedal and demand maximum output, and the timing is retarded. This strategy has a number of advantages: lower emissions and much more power, to name but 2. The proof and benefit of the technology is found on the open road. While peak torque is generated at 4,000 RPM, as much as 80% is available to the driver at engine speeds as low as 1,800 RPM. It also happens to transform the GS into a true screamer. Matched with the V8 engine is a 5-speed automatic transmission that offers a do-it-yourself mode, minus the associated aggravation of a clutch. The 2-mode box can be shifted via 2 steering wheel mounted buttons. To activate the buttons, you simply select the manual position with the shifter, and from there on, you're in complete control. The upshift buttons sit on the underside of the steering wheel, while the downshift buttons sit on the face. Heading into a fast sweeper, you nudge the down button and select the right gear. Now you can carry your speed all the way through the corner. Works well too.
The only drawback in all of this is that if you use the buttons, you have to hold the steering wheel at 20 to 4 and not at the more correct 4:3 position.
To ensure complete control and stability, the GS400 features ABS, traction control and vehicle skid control. The VSC can be likened to an invisible co-pilot who uses both the traction control and anti-lock brake system to help the driver maintain control. If the GS400 begins to fishtail, the skid control system commands the ABS to apply the brake to the outside front wheel, and if required, reduce the engine's output. This action gives the driver a fighting chance of regaining control. The handling characteristics are also superior in nature. The fully independent double wishbone design features coil springs, gas pressurized shocks and sway bars at both ends. The result is a comfortable and compliant ride that does not wimp out in the handling department. Speed rated 235/45 ZR17 tyres and power rack and pinion steering round out the package.
Inside the GS, the owner is treated with the respect deserving of somebody that's just shelled out about $70,000. You get a truly funky set of gauges, beautifully buttery soft leather interior, just enough wood to add warmth, and a truly magnificent Lexus Nakamichi stereo. It's all a knockout. You know, the trunk gets mixed reviews. On the one hand, you do get a full-size spare tyre that comes complete with a proper rim. On the other, there's no ski pass-through, so you can't carry anything of length. In launching the GS400, Lexus has stepped out of the closet and proved that they can run with the finest barn burners that Europe has to offer. To paraphrase a colleague of mine, may the games begin. It's time to update our long-term Corolla. Now, both the things I'm going to talk about today, well, they have to do with the washer-wiper system. You know, there's an old adage, see and be seen. Well, being seen in a Corolla is not a bad thing, and thanks to 3 powerful washer jets, you can actually see. Problem is, though, we'll wait from now until the end of this summer, and then maybe even longer before we actually get to see the wipers. You have to turn them on. Once you've got the wipers on and the windshield's cleared, you'll soon see the Corolla is not a bad route to go, as we'll show you in our next update.
Our Midas tip of the week concerns the use of thread lockers. Thread lockers are liquid chemicals that you can apply to threaded fasteners, nuts and bolts on an automobile to prevent those things from vibrating loose. Here's a perfect example of how wrong things can go if you don't use thread lockers. This alternator went on a pickup truck, a Ford pickup truck, about 6 weeks ago, and this pulley just fell off yesterday because there wasn't any thread locker used on the nut. If they'd used thread locker, they would have kept it on there. Now, when this pulley fell off, it took the fan belt with it. That meant no water pump, no fan, and a grossly overheated engine. The customer was really lucky that he was able to make it in without damaging that engine. The coolant was boiling like crazy when he got to the shop. Really should have shut it off. Now, if the installer had used a drop of thread locker on that thread before they installed the nut holding this pulley on, this never would have happened, and they'd avoided a big problem. And this thing was only 6 weeks old, remember, so things can go wrong in a hurry. If you use thread locker, you'll avoid something just like this. That's your Midas tip of the week.
Every new owner makes an improvement to the toilets and then they move on to something else. So we should have good toilets here at the very least.
A portion of Motoring 98 is brought to you by the Solder Seal Gunk family of automotive products, makers of Puncture Seal Gold and Liquid Wrench.
We're back here at Mosport, a track that has hosted such events as Grand Prix and USAC racing and many more. But you know, that's all history now. And the question being asked here over the 25 years or so is, does this track have a future? Well, we think we met the man who has the answer to that question. The history of Mosport is legendary. It's seen every type of racing and has welcomed some of the greatest names in the sport. But although the crowds have gone and the track has been forgotten, the respect still remains.
This is tops. This is as good as it gets. I mean, any racer who's raced on them all will say that. The only negative that guys like Tommy Kendall will come up with is it's such a dangerous track. That can be corrected, but the layout itself, they'll change at their peril because it's the best. It's among the finest tracks in the world. I say that simply because it brings out the best in the drivers. The drivers who learn how to drive here can race anywhere.
The track has seen many owners since the death of Harvey Hudas, And the latest is Don Panos, who made a fortune developing the nicotine patch, among other things. He recently purchased Sebring and Road Atlanta.
The issue is we need to make it customer friendly. It needs to have proper restrooms, it needs to have good catering. We've got to make the experience so that the customer enjoys coming here, because he can go to a stick or ball game for the same amount of money and get treated properly. These facilities in the past have really not stepped up to that challenge, and that's one of the things we're here and we're prepared to do.
There ought to be a future here. Don Panos has never been here yet, so I mean, like, we don't know how things are going to shape up. They're saying all the right things, but as they say themselves, every new owner says that, and each of them makes an improvement to the toilets, and then they move on to something else. So we should have good toilets here at the very least. But as far as runoff areas and track safety and the amenities for paying fans, they have a lot of work to do. Clearly, the place has been running down for years and years.
I think when we get involved with this, that Road Atlanta is a good showing of that. People questioned, what are we going to do? We're going to put up a couple of new restrooms and give it a coat of paint. I think people who just came out there for our grand reopening, the journalists and the community, were thrilled with what we have done, and we hope that the people here will feel the same way at Mosport.
Can the people who devised a patch for your nicotine habit come up with a patch for an ailing racetrack? That's coming up later on Kenzie's Corner.
Now, usually we head to the garage and join Bill Gardiner at this point in the program, but guess what? Bill is not in the garage. Now, you've all heard that saying, like a kid in a candy store? Well, this week, Bill has a real sweet tooth.
Well, Brad, you're right. We're here at the Automotive Industries Association trade show in Toronto, the International Center, and it's a must-see for anyone like myself that's in this trade, because every piece of equipment, every tool, every parts supplier and manufacturer is here at this show, so you get to see everything here all under one roof. And the neat thing about it is that a lot of this equipment is up and running here. Anything that can be up and running is running and demonstratable here, so you can actually see this stuff being used. And there's a lot of neat stuff here, a lot of stuff I'd like to have for my shop if the budget would allow it, I'll tell you. Here's a perfect example of a machine that's up and running here at the show. And this machine is finished honing the cylinder block so that the piston rings will seat properly when the engine's rebuilt.
This is the Sun and CK21, and you can hone and bore size typical Chevy V8 engine block in about 12 minutes. It uses diamond tooling, which is for fast stock removal, and as well as giving you a good proper finish and long stone life.
This machine we're looking at right now refinishes cylinder heads and refinishes intake manifolds and block decks so that they're in suitable condition, that the gaskets will seal properly when the engine's reassembled. This machine is capable of producing a number of different finishes, and depending on the type of material used in the block and head, that finish can vary quite a bit.
You're looking at a three-dimensional alignment machine, and basically what it does is it takes an image of the targets here and portrays it back into the machine. We have mapped out the targets. Internally, we know exactly the diameter of the circles of these targets, and that's how we get our readings. Very easy. Basically, all the guy has to do is set the target up on the wheel, as you see here. He rolls the car back, it takes a reading, he pulls it forward, the machine verifies what it saw when it rolled back. Any change, it will produce error. It will ask the person to redo it, and if it verifies it the second time, it produces its readings from there. You don't have to be a mechanic to use it. All you have to be able to do is read the screen and look at it. The screen will prompt you into the next phase of the alignment process.
Well, Brad, you can see why I enjoy this show so much, because there's all kinds of new products here, all kinds of equipment set up and running. You can actually try it out, play with it a bit, work with it, and it gives you a chance to see it all under one roof. And the big thing I really like about this show was being at the Quaker State booth and meeting all the different mechanics and shop owners from all over the country. Came to the booth, and some of these guys told me things that, for example, the guys from Northern Alberta and Northern Ontario telling me about cold start problems and remedies for those, that, you know, things that I only see for 2 days of the year here in Toronto, they get a couple of months of. And guys from the east coast of Canada telling me about some corrosion problems and how they deal with those. They've got a much worse problem than we've got here in Southern Ontario, and I thought we had it pretty bad. As far as new products at the show, there were lots of them, a lot of neat things to see, discovered a lot of things. The Quaker State clear bottles, what a neat idea. for the first time, people can actually see what clean motor oil is supposed to look like before it goes in their engine. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardiner for Motoring 98.
Earlier in the show, various people were waxing nostalgic about the good old days of Mosport. You know, I can remember when I was a very, very small child, going out there, maybe 63 or 64, and watching USAC stock cars, big Pontiacs and Mercuries, driven by guys like Paul Goldsmith and Eddie Sachs and Roger Ward. That was a huge fun. And on the office wall of Harvey Hudis, who owned the track almost forever, was an aerial photograph taken at a Can-Am race, maybe 67 or 68, and from turn 1 to turn 8, all you could see was parked cars. Now, there was over 105,000 paying spectators in the park that particular day, the largest sporting crowd in Canadian history up to that point. Now, what's it going to take to get Mosport back to those glory days? Well, the new management knows exactly what it's going to take. They know that hundreds of thousands of people aren't going to come out there to see Jim Kenzie drive a Hyundai Tiburon showroom stock car. They want to see IndyCar, Formula One, NASCAR, CASCAR, big-time car racing. To do that, they're going to have to upgrade the track, make it safer primarily, build new pits. Now, to attract people, they're going to have to get better hotels, better accommodation, better grandstands. It's going to take a lot of money. And although there are about 8 million people within about a 2-hour drive of Mosport, are they going to be able to get people to drive that way just to see a sporting event? I mean, there's a lot of competition for the sporting dollar. People can take the subway downtown in Toronto to watch the Raptors or the Blue Jays or the Maple Leaf. Geez, you know, Mosport might just have a shot. I'm Jim Kenzie.
We've seen the Hummer on Motoring before, and it's no secret it's not our cup of tea. But this is the 98 model, and the Hummer boys say it is a much improved version. In fact, they're so confident, they've challenged us to take it through the pylon course. And next week, one of Canada's top race car drivers will do just that. You won't want to miss it. That's it for now. We'll see you next week for more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
How'd that go?
Oh, not bad.
TSN's Motoring 98 has been brought to you by Quaker State. The big Q stands for quality, always has, always will. And Midas, for new, longer-lasting performance friction carbon metallic brake pads.